Hello, everyone. Dr. Christine Smith back for a wonderful interview today with Wesley, I believe it's Fuqua, and Stephanie Kwong, who are both components and leaders in Rapid Rewire Method, which is a technique for helping to reprogram the subconscious mind. And it is a really fascinating technique that has some very rapid effects for being able to clear an event or clear a trauma just through a mental process. Almost like a little bit of self-hypnosis, but you also have a facilitator who is holding space. And in this, you can do a variety of exercises that almost explore the 3D mapping of your brain in an internal world. Hello, Stephanie. How are you?
Hello. I'm great.
And
I'm doing both and. I'm in the car because I have my nephew visiting and my stepson. They're at the zoo and we're making this happen while they also get to enjoy their time together.
hey, this is one of the blessings of technology these days, is it's like we can just do the things that we want to do all at the same time. So I
Exactly.
love that. And then we are getting Wesley on here.
Perfect.
And perfect. We're just getting everybody on. Thanks for everybody joining. And for anyone joining, like, feel free to ask us questions throughout. We're going to be talking about a variety of things having to do with kind of neurology, the subconscious mind, like how to really create transformations for yourself and stuck identities. And we think these are really important for people. Hi, Wesley.
Hey, how you doing? Good to meet you.
Good to see you. Okay, so I was just kind of telling everybody a little bit about what we'll go over, but I'd also love for you guys to introduce yourselves. I was just starting to tell people, but you both have such interesting backgrounds. I'd love if you could just tell people a little bit about yourself and how you came into this niche of really working with the subconscious mind. And whoever wants to go first, go for it.
Stephanie, it only feels right when you go first because you always go first.
All right. Well, I will go first. So I actually was working as a coach for about 12 years prior to meeting Wesley. And it's always perfect that I go first because then it tees him up and how we came to the Rapid Rewire Method. But essentially I was working as a coach. And when I first started, this was back in like 2008 when coaching wasn't popular. And I think a lot of the protocols out there were very much more conscious. And over time, I realized that really what was important is the subconscious and really getting in there to do the deep work. And so I started learning tools like NLP, hypnosis, even getting in the body, somatic experiencing, EFT, havening, breath work, all trained in those. And it really enabled me as a coach to work with people to get rapid and lasting change. And I was known for that. I worked with like the top 1% and really helped them to break through quickly and sustainably, and I got paid well for it. However, back in December 2020, got pregnant. I had a miscarriage 9.5 weeks later, and it was devastating because I really wanted to be a mother of my own biological child. And so, of course, when I found out I was pregnant, we were not trying for a kid, but when it occurred, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a miracle. My little spirit child wants to come through. But when I lost the baby, I went really dark. And I know grief. I'm very familiar with it. I know how it moves, but this time something was radically different because over time, I started getting worse in my ability to function. So, I couldn't look at social media because I felt like everybody was announcing they were pregnant in 2021. I had days where I just didn't want to get out of bed and was having suicidal ideation. And as an entrepreneur, you can't just take 5 months off. So it was really impacting my life. And, if I was out in public and I saw anything baby related, same thing, just deep dysregulation. And so I knew I needed help, and everything I'd been trained in, it wasn't doing the job. And even with an extraordinary community of coaches, healers, therapists, shamans, it just wasn't moving the needle for me to be able to alleviate that grief. Even shaving the edge off so that I could get through day to day until I met Wesley. And literally in one process of these tools that we call the Rapid Rewire Method, he processed the trauma of the miscarriage, and I felt the emotional charge of that deep grief and sadness leave my body. And when I checked back in, because he has we check in afterwards to see where we're at, I literally could not feel or find sadness or grief in my body, and I was searching for it, and it was gone. And it's never come back. I've never had to go reprocess it again. I haven't, I can see babies or pregnant people or look at social media, and I'm neutral. And so I remember when that happened, I like cussed at Wesley because I was like, wait, I was known for getting these rapid and lasting changes, but what the F did you do to me? And can we keep going? And so we continued to work together. And around the 7-week mark of us consistently working together, I heard the divine command, you're meant to bring these tools into the world. And so that's why Wesley and I joined forces to really get these tools that are not that well known yet out into the world. And I'll now pass it over to Wesley to share his background, but it's that's how I came to these tools and how Wesley and I connected up on this mission together.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, so I come from the education world. So I taught psychology at Maricopa Colleges in Arizona for some time, almost 15 years. And while I was there, I got very, very interested in consciousness science and ended up creating coursework on the psychology of consciousness and mature ego development. And in a nutshell, I was teaching a graduate course to a bunch of undergrads and teaching them Ken Wilber's integral theory, and they didn't know what was happening to them. They thought they were signing up for a class where we were going to be going into altered states, and were quite hopeful that I'd be sliding them some LSD or mushrooms under the desk. And obviously I wasn't going to be able to do that. But I wanted to take them into these territories of awareness. It was going to be very important that they had their own direct experience. So that set me on a unique journey, and that was learning evocation methods of profound awareness that didn't involve chemicals or compounds to get there. And there are dozens and dozens and dozens of ways entering into the same experiences of consciousness, but maintaining lucidity and not having to use chemicals to get there. So it was a very, very popular class, and we did that for about another 7.5 years. And I was really proud of it because I was always searching for new tools. Just toward the end of that tenure, I was introduced to a Yugoslavian psychologist and his work. His name is Zivorad Slavinsky, and he was doing the impossible. It stopped me in my tracks. It was everything I had been looking for as an applied modality. In 20 to 40 minutes, he was getting people through their most hardcore problems. Traumas, phobias, negative experiences, problems, barriers to goals, disserving beliefs, disserving identities. And it was all happening real time. So when the session was done, they were no longer triggered by the phobic stimulus, or they could put their attention on the trauma and talk about it, but not melt down and break down. If it was a problem, they could surpass it. If there was a barrier, it wasn't there any longer. And I was just like, what is happening? I have got to learn this. So kind of everything stopped and went on a 9-year apprenticeship to learn from him, moved up through the ranks of being a processor and then eventually a trainer, and then became a master trainer where I was given the ability to teach other people how to do the work. And about 3 months after that finished, he died, complications of a stroke. And that's left about 18 of us on paper and only about 4 or 5 of us active in the world that are still continuing on to teach this work. And so a lot of my time is spent training other practitioners how to do what I do, but also I keep a roster of private clients that keeps my knife edge sharp, taking people like Stephanie through experiences and getting them back to functioning again. So really just a full circle of having been steeped in psychology for a long time and being interested in consciousness and transformational change that way. And then was just lucky enough and fortunate enough to meet my teacher right at the right moment, and then be in a position now where we can continue to show other people how to do this.
That is such an amazing story. I didn't realize that your apprenticeship was that long with him. That's wow. And you said only like 20 or so people teaching it in the world. And so I love stuff like this, right? These kind of ancient knowledges that have been known in certain regions, but starting to bring them into a way that's very accessible for people. And I was lucky enough to come across this through meeting Stephanie, and I love using it in practice. It is so helpful for people, and it's simple enough that I can use it with a kid, and it's complex enough that I can use it with someone who's been through like complex PTSD. And I can even use it when people are on the table. So like sometimes I've done it while I'm doing body work, and that is a very interesting thing to do as well. So I love tools like this because I think they're invaluable. And I think there's a lot of subconscious tools that all have a lot of similarities, but they also all have their own differences, and I think like their own medicine to them. But if you were to kind of give people who maybe this is newer for a kind of broader understanding of some of the global tools used in subconscious transformation and why like some approaches might work better for some people, How would you describe that for people?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, I mean, gosh, Zivrad probably created close to 100 different protocols. Some of them were very applicable and pragmatic. Some of them were very esoteric. I've whittled it down to there's about 26 of them that I think are useful that we actually teach in the curriculum. And then you can break it down to there's probably 8 that get used more often than not. And regardless of where we fall in that spectrum of how many tools we have, they all have one thing in common, and that is they are all a uh, they're all systematic approximations to allowing us to de-identify with emotional charge, right? So at the end of the day, whichever one I use, they're helping us de-identify with something that we're clinging to. And it's in that de-identification where we realize, oh, that's a part of me, but that's not me. And there's a liberation in that. There's a freedom in that. We get a little psychological distance and we can hold something and see it in a way that we didn't see it before. We're looking at it from a vantage point where we're no longer identified with it or attached to it or somehow enmeshed with it, right? And so all the protocols basically do that. And then they use some very fundamental exploitations of basics like off-the-shelf psychological principles to do that. So some of them being like paradoxical intention. So the work of Viktor Frankl, where you go against the thing, that you go toward the thing you're resisting, and that allows it to release. Or using an alternating technique where we're pulling something left and right or up and down or back and forth to like set it free in the same way that you would wiggle out a tooth or try to get something out of the ground. Or following a chain technique. And so all these are basic psychological principles that are being used across an array of other modalities. What's making ours special is we're focusing not on the story or the narrative that often comes with people's emotional charge, but we're only focusing on the 4 elements of awareness, which are images, thoughts, emotions, and body sensations. And when we just duplicate the neurotags that are there, the residue, then that's enough for the brain to go, oh, okay, there's closure around that now, where it was previously stuck, and then people are able to move forward. So again, fancy words, but we're de-identifying with the problem. And when we de-identify and move further away from that, one of the side effects is more profound states of awareness. So we're moving into oftentimes causal states of awareness, sometimes non-dual states of awareness, because of that de-identification process. And so at lower levels of consciousness, there seems like there's no solutions. And on higher levels of consciousness, there are no problems. And so we're moving into those higher levels of awareness where we can see something and reevaluate it with a greater depth of truth. We can tell ourselves more truthful interpretations about what's happening. And at the end of the day, we can let it go.
I love that. You basically just described what the gym for your brain looks like, right? It's like all these different tools, all these pieces of equipment that you can use to strengthen different parts of your brain through this understanding of how the mind works and how psychology works. And I have a comment I want to bring up about the concept of like ego, but I want to also hear Steph's perspective on like those tools and what you've seen and your view on that.
Yeah, so what Wesley said, which I find really profound, is the fact that these protocols were designed to work through the images, the thoughts, the emotions, and the body sensations, right? So we're tapping into the mind, into the emotions, and into the body, somatics. When I learned all those other tools, they were all fantastic, right? I was able to get results. However, because of the way they were designed, there were times where it took a little bit longer, or was just a little bit harder, or I wasn't 100% certain that they were going to work all the time. Like if I took someone in hypnosis, I knew they were in that hypersuggestible state, but gosh, which process while they're in state will actually work to get the job done? Because there's so many pathways. And it was very much like mind emotions. We didn't tap as much into somatics inside of hypnosis. Same thing with cognitive behavioral therapy, right? That taps in more on the cognition. We don't really address as much the emotions in the body. And so they're all great, but what I discovered and why I became such a fanatic about these protocols in particular is it really works with the mind, the emotions, and the body in the way that a memory or an experience is stored. And when you're able to break it apart by using the way these tools are structured, as Wesley said, you can de-identify it and liberate yourself from the problem. And as these tools are also naturally designed, is as you go through them, you're bringing unconscious content conscious, and then you're reflecting and clearing. And how Wesley, when he teaches, he always says, if you can put your attention to the problem, experience it, or whatever elements come up, articulate it, then you can free yourself of it. But I think a lot of these tools that we have too, it doesn't really give you the freedom to let the participant bring it up on their own. A lot of modalities out there are very projection, like you project onto the client. You already, as a facilitator, have an idea of where you're going to take them because they told you the outcome, but maybe, just maybe, their inner healer knows exactly where to go, and we literally just act as a facilitator. We go through the protocols, you know them, Christine, right? And so it's really the person on the other side that's doing all the work, that's bringing up however that problem or stuck identity or emotional turmoil is locked into their system. And then they can start to, through answering the prompts inside of the tool, the different tools, be able to break it apart on their own so that, you know, as Leslie says too, they get to keep the transformation. It's not like we as a facilitator is doing anything to them. They're the ones doing all the work to break it apart. And that's also, I think, what sets these tools apart. But that's also why they work so quickly, is it taps into all the ways that, you know, these issues are stuck inside the mind, the emotions, and the body.
I love both of those descriptions, and I'm just taking all this in while I'm also reviewing your guys' backgrounds. And I find it, so for anyone who doesn't know, Steph also has like a ton of knowledge around like hypnotic states and how to get the brain to enter these kind of programming states. And I know that there's a component of Rapid Rewire that I did like, where it's like there's something rhythmic about it. And it creates that kind of state for the brain where it's almost like being rocked, right? It's like kind of safe. And then, because you just mentioned something about like the person on the other end is doing all the work. So true. For anyone who's done this work, you can leave feeling like you just ran a marathon. And then I'm looking at Wesley's background, and you've taught classes around consciousness and mature ego development. And I think the concept of ego is a really interesting thing to address in this work, right? Because it's the part of you that's attached to a story or a trauma or an identity, and you know, that concept of justice. And it's like, well, but if I let this go, like that justice won't happen, it'll be gone. And so this is where I think people get stuck in identities, which is kind of going to be our next question that we get to dive into. But I'd love to hear, I mean, I guess we can kind of dive into it with this as well, but I wanted to talk about the concept of our attachments to stuck identities and how they really hinder us. And then maybe you guys can comment on like how the ego and maturity level of it, what that looks like and how it's a part of this. And yeah, just your thoughts on that in general.
Cool. We have 6 hours, right? Okay, just making sure. No,
Right.
I'll do the impossible for you. I'll try to do it in 6 minutes or less. Okay, so going fast here. Everybody hang on. What creates, let me back up. Identities, let's define what we mean by that. So an identity for us is a point of view plus the goal we want to achieve from that point of view. So those two things collectively, and that's a lot for us to get our heads around, but it's the role plus the goal, okay? And that makes up an identity. So what that means is that if we take on an identity, we're doing that to achieve a something, okay? So I was running a couple minutes late to this call because I was in the identity of a coach. And in that identity of a coach, I had a goal, which was to get my client to the resolution point that we had agreed on. And that was taking a lot longer today with him than I had imagined it was going to be. So I had an identity, which was me being in my coach and therapist practitioner hat. And I had this goal to get him to this outcome that we agreed on. Well, now I'm no longer in that identity. Now I'm in the identity of an interviewee, right? And now my goal is to how am I going to make clear and concise responses so that people can understand what we're up to? Well, when my wife comes home later, she isn't going to want me to be in either one of those identities. She's going to want me to be in the role of lover and husband, right? And then my goal is going to be something else, right? Which is to connect and be with her. So we assume an identity to achieve something. And identities are not a problem. We need them to navigate the world. Something's got to drive the car, and these identities do that. That's never a problem. Stuck identities are a problem. Okay. So when we over identify with something, right? When we say this is me, or I'm this, or I'm that, that becomes a problem. And it's even in the English. So you can hear somebody say, I'm sad. What they're saying is, I am sad. Well, no, they are not sadness. They're experiencing sadness, but they themselves are not sadness. But in that statement, in that state, we start to fuse with it. That becomes a problem. Thank God my father doesn't even know what Instagram is, so I can talk shit about him here. My dad has this idea that he's a Marine. His identity is, I'm a Marine. And that somehow seems to come before father and before husband and before community member, because he's got this idea that he's a Marine and he identifies with that. Well, there's a stuckness around that, and it creates other problems because now he can't relate in other ways that people hope or wish that he could. So he's limited, right? He's stuck. And so it's these stuck identities that create our problems. And when we can de-identify with it, we open it up, and now there's a spectrum of choice. So if I integrate an identity, it doesn't mean that I can't assume it again. It just means I don't feel compelled to cling to it, right? So if I integrate, like, I don't know, what's something I could integrate? Two identities might be unworthy person and worthy person, right? Well, at the moment of integration, I should be able to manifest both freely, right? And so there might be a time where it would be appropriate for me to feel a bit unworthy. I don't want to not have that capacity. I should also not feel bad if I'm not feeling worthy all the time, because it's impossible to stay there. I need the freedom to move up and down that spectrum and meet the moment for the identity that I want to manifest. Now, maybe I have a preference, but I don't want to get rid of one or the other, right? Same with emotional states. We need fear. Nobody's going to survive past about 2 minutes without fear being something that might need to be assumed, right? And also feeling safe isn't something that we should try to aspire to constantly feeling all the time, because we might miss a lot of things that are happening. We need to be able to move up and down this spectrum. So states and identities, they come and they go, and they're not permanent. Stages of consciousness are permanent, and that's what would take us 6 hours to talk about. But these identities, we just need to be able to have flexibility within them. And so when we integrate something, or we say we let it go, what we're really saying is, now I have more degrees of freedom to meet the moments that are coming my way and use the one that's appropriate. So to sum it all up with a funny image, if I put on a raincoat, that's an identity. Why am I putting on the raincoat? Well, it appears as though it's raining outside. So I wear my raincoat outside. Well, whenever I get to where I'm going, it's dry inside. I don't need the raincoat anymore. I don't need that identity anymore. I should go hang it up and put it in the coat closet. But if I run around the office building and convince everybody that this raincoat is really my skin and you should treat me as such, then I start to get into a bit of a wacky problem. Right? So we want to wear the identity we need when we need it, and then we got to put it back in the closet when we don't need it. And maturity and growth and healthiness is being able to assume anything with freedom and not have anything in the category of good or bad, because all of them are natural responses. None of them are negative by nature, and none of them are so good that we should keep them all the time.
That was a fantastic explanation, and I actually really loved the raincoat image. I got this image of like when our childhood triggers and identities come back all of a sudden, and then it's like this adult in a 6-year-old raincoat that's buttoned way too tight and preventing you from living your life, right? Yeah, thank you. That was really funny. Steph, what about yourself?
Yeah, no, but I mean, and just piggybacking on that, if you actually pay attention to your own life, right? I want people who are watching to have this be applicable to you. Like, where in your life do you feel that you're stuck in a particular identity that is actually getting in the way of the outcomes that you want to create in your life? This is where, the rubber meets the road, where it's like, I mean, talk about entrepreneurs. You and I have had so many conversations, Christine, but let's say, gosh, if you don't feel worthy of the success and you're in that unworthy identity usually, or habituated based on whatever childhood programming or something that you experienced, then you look around you and you're like, why is everybody else achieving the goals that they want or making the money that they want or this and this and this? And it has nothing to do with they're better than you or they're more capable than you. But when you're in the identity of, say, an unworthy person, you're going to play at that level. You're going to start to continue to self-sabotage and make yourself right inside of the identity, because that's the goal you're accomplishing. As Leslie said, it's a role, unworthy. The goal is you're going to keep achieving the outcome for an unworthy person. So that's why then when you're able to integrate that, as he mentioned, if you wanted to choose to be a worthy person or unworthy, you're now at choice again. You're not stuck and in those same habituated patterns, unable to get out of it. And then you go and you try to learn some tactical things to be able to build your business better or, attract your relationship that you want. And then you keep recalling the same exact experiences. Why? Because you're in that stuck identity. That's how you can tell. And what we want to be able to do inside of our work, and I really feel any transformation modality, is that you have pure power and freedom to choose once again. You are not somebody who is on autopilot. You're not somebody who is just completely run by the software, the blueprint that was you were indoctrinating to as a child. You literally have the power and the freedom to choose in every single moment in front of you of who you want to be and what you want to create, and then to be able to actually achieve those things.
And there's nothing more powerful than that, because when we can start to shift our perspective on something, not only can you just immediately transform something terrible into something joyful, it's that's really how we heal trauma. And I think a lot of people get very stuck on the story and figuring out the story and what happened and who was at blame and blah, blah, when really the healing comes from remembering everything it made you forget, which is how to be at peace and at ease and feel joyful and not be afraid of it. And so it's with this type of work, it's a frequency upgrade, right? It's we're going in, we're kind of doing a software update, and then all of a sudden your Wi-Fi emitter emits at a different frequency that interacts with other frequencies on that level. And that's exactly what she's talking about, the concept of well, if you want to manifest something into your life, you're never going to have it until you can actually emit that type of energy. And if you are stuck in an identity of, I'm not worth that, or
insecure, hopeless,
this will never
helpless.
happen to me.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That kind of energy will never be able to access it. And so I think one of the other cool things about some of these techniques, and then we can dive into case studies that you guys have done, or really outcomes that you really love. So you can maybe think about those for a moment. But in this, I think there are so many tools that are used across multiple modalities, but I really liked in Rapid Rewire, there's this component of spaciousness that it creates inside the brain. It's almost like you are exploring inside of your mind as a 3D map. And I remember Wesley doing an exercise where he was, asking someone, okay, well, where is this located out in this area? Can you tell me what the sensations are that are associated with it? And that's kind of what you were talking about at the beginning, Steph, of it's a way of programming your brain in the same methodology that memories are made. And so when we can start working with a memory in this way, it doesn't really matter what the story is, even if it's inaccurate, because you're working with the concept to transform it into what you want it to be. And I know that's scary for people to think about sometimes. You're well, but I have to remember that horrible thing that happened in my childhood with complete accuracy. Otherwise I'll lose myself. It's well, really, you've already lost yourself. So it's instead, let's come back to who you want to be, and you can decide that any day. So I'd be very curious to kind of hear, maybe one or two of your guys' favorite case studies and outcomes and transformations that you've seen, and kind of what the tools were in the process.
Steph, I think we should just use some of the ones that we already. I mean, yeah, let's tell the story, at least about Emily, probably that's really compelling.
Yeah. So I mean, gosh, an insane amount of stories, Christine, of what we've been able to see. And obviously Wesley's been with these tools a lot longer, and he consistently works with people. So he's constantly getting the results for folks. And then of course I've been able to, but I just don't work with people as much. And then watching our students receive and also be able to facilitate these types of changes. And I wanted to mention something really quick to what you're saying, and I'm going to dive into the case studies. But when you said people are always trying to look for what's the genesis of the issue, I had an amazing mentor who said to me, she's like, Steph, you don't always need to know why the trash stinks to know you want to throw it out. Just dump it. And I think so often in a lot of different modalities, we're always when did it happen? When did it first start? When did I first start to believe that I wasn't enough or that I was unlovable? And it's like, does it really matter? Because even if you can identify when that moment in time was, it doesn't just automatically change. You still have to dive in and do the work to shift that, right? So that's what I love about this, is we don't have to dive into story. It's just like, get it done. But we have so many, but one of them that was really profound for us, and one of our students, Emily, she was about to do our level 2 training, and she knows that in our level 2 is where we teach some of the more robust tools, so for trauma release and other things. And so she had messaged me and she was like, Steph, I can't wait for level 2 to start. I experienced a big trauma and I want to release it. And so I hopped on a call with her and I said, what happened? And she said, I witnessed a death at a beach. And I was like, what? She goes, yeah, she saw a pro surfer hit his head on coral. She and her partner were the first ones there on site. First responders came, crowd formed, and eventually he passed away. And she said, I have been having trouble sleeping. I can't, I'm having random panic and anxiety attacks throughout the day. I keep seeing flashbacks of his deceased face, and she couldn't go back to the beach anymore. And she lives at the beach. So this has now become a problem for her, right? It's really impacting her ability to function. And I was like, we're not going to wait 3 more weeks for you. And so I lined it to Wesley, and I was like, hey, this is a situation. Can we work with Emily? And for us, we're like, well, let's also record it so that we can use it for our level 2 training. And then she also gets to have the healing. And so we hopped on a Zoom. Wesley started the process at the 6-minute mark. It was done by 24 minutes. And so it was like 18 minutes total. And by the end of it, she was good. And we love to check our work. So we said, can you go back to the beach and Zoom with us so we can make sure that it worked? So she went back the next day. I missed her. And I said, can you please go back again? So she went back 3 days later. And we have her on Zoom walking around saying that she's seeing more vivid details of the beach and the, and the area that she was at and she had seen before. And then she's walking along the beach and she's talking to me and she sees a memorial that someone had put up for the man who had passed. And she said, I feel nothing but peace and gratitude. And then we kept chatting, and then she goes, oh, and I forgot to tell you, I want to take up surfing. And I was like, wait, what? You saw a pro surfer pass away and you want to take up this new sport? And so it was wild to me. And that's when we knew that she had really integrated it, because now she has the choice to choose something which once she would have never done. And I can't even imagine, what this surfing maybe potentially brings her, but she actually now has the ability to try it instead of just being afraid. And her world that was once very closed in, she was back. So that was one of our really incredible stories. We have more. Wesley, do you have one that you want to share that comes to mind? Maybe even one, gosh. Since I know, Christine, you work with people around the health space. Is there one that you've
go ahead,
done?
Wesley. I'll ponder one as well.
Yeah.
I mean, people come to me for healing around some of the most horrific things you can imagine happening to human beings. I mean, sexual violations, catastrophes, accidents, really awful, overwhelming information. And I'm doing these things, constantly throughout the week. So to pull one out, they all just kind of swim together. But there's been several instances where people come to me with debilitating consequences of sexual violations, and where it's affecting their sexual functioning, it's affecting their relationships with their partners. And sure enough, something's happened at 19, 9, 3, something like that. And being able to quickly, without engaging any narrative or story, but allow them to go back, de-identify with that circumstance. And these trauma release tools work in such a way where we sort of force cognitive dissonance. So at one moment, they're in the space of the images, thoughts, emotions, and body sensations that are at the peak moment of this event. And then with a little bit of neuro-linguistic programming, we switch over to a right brain spatial task. And in that moment of that scramble, their brain has to go, oh, is it present moment or is it that thing? And the brain will always choose the present moment. Mm-hmm. And that closes that loop that's been open. So the emotional charge is made up of the mass of looping thoughts and emotions, or the overimportance or meaning they're placing on the event. And then when it finally closes, it just becomes information. And when it becomes information, it's no different than them talking about what they had for lunch last Tuesday. Mm-hmm. And so they've successfully de-identified with it. They remember it happened. They know it was unfortunate. They know it was terrible, but it's no longer triggering them in exactly the same way. So they realize, oh, that was a part of me, but that's not me. I don't need that to define who I am or what I'm doing or where I'm going. And from there, they start making more open choices about reapproaching their sexuality or their partners or how they're going to show up in the world. I do a lot of stuff around car accidents. I will literally, okay, great, jump in the car. I'm on the phone with them. We've just finished this process. Grab your car keys, jump in the car. We're going for a ride. I will make them drive to the place of the accident and tell me what's happening for them. And invariably, every single time, whether they're really young or they're very old, they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, it happened there, but I'm okay. It's not going to bother me anymore when I drive through here. So we're returning people back to a place of freedom. And regardless of what it is that's troubled them, the important part is that they move to a place where they are now liberated of that. And if they want to choose to think about it, they can, but they're no longer trapped in the trigger of, or worrying that it's going to bother them again. They've literally transcended it. They've transcended and included it. That would be the best way of putting it. It's still there. We're not going to make them forget something because it's a part of who they are, but they've transcended it.
I think transcended is such like a good word to use for this. I was thinking of a gal that I worked with, and she's mom and stuff, and in some shared communities. And so it can be tough to do emotional work with someone in shared communities because there's certain things that you want to keep private, and that's the beauty of these modalities is you can. And so it's like she didn't need to tell me anything about what was happening for her, and we even just used like a very simple process. It was like end of words, right? Like one of the first ones that you learn in your guys' course. And I was just doing that while I was doing some body work, and we had started with like a little bit of nervous system work, but what had happened is she just had like a bunch of stressors come in, and then her nervous system just like took a dive, right? Which like happens to us sometimes when we get whacked by everything at once. And she was concerned, and she's like, I feel, like I might need to go somewhere for support, but like I want to try something because this is just like not me. And I've been there where your nervous system's just not updated for like what's going on. And so we started with some body work to help release her nervous system, and then we were just doing that. And I think we did this all in about 3 sessions of like, and I'll mix different modalities sometimes depending on what tools are needed, but I use that one all the time. And it's just like simple. I've used it with a kid who was in a car accident as well. But with her, she was able to go through all these things that were happening, not tell me anything about what they were. And we got her to this place where like, at the end of our 3rd session, she was just done. And she's like, okay, like I'm good now. And this was someone who was like considering going to get like, like inpatient care. And it was someone who I've known. It was a flip in her personality, right? And like I was like, this isn't you either. And just in doing that work, she was fine. It was just turning over the nervous system, helping her perspective, helping her move through something, de-identify, let it go, move to the next phase. And then like the little girl who was in the car accident, right? She'd been in a car accident with her dad. She was scared to get in the car. And then we were just kind of going through all of these emotions of like, okay, well, like what's the purpose of this one? Just like the movie, like Inside Out, right? They do a really good job of going through how like every emotion has a purpose, even anxiety. And so it's like, I like those concepts, and it allows you to work with people in these ways where they don't see their anger or their sadness or their anxiety as evil. It's like, okay, well, like what role is it serving for you, or what role is it not serving for you? And I like the ones where you can kind of expand and contract things. And then I wouldn't mind doing like upper levels of your guys' course at some point once I'm done with the other courses that I'm always doing. But I liked, like you were talking about, like linking and like chain techniques. And it's like, as you start to get into this work, you can learn how to do this in your own mind and with clients. And that is why I wanted to have you guys on and just talk about this and get these things out there, because it's like a whole new, but also not new way of working with the mind. It's just new to a lot of people's consciousness. And it's like, you can do incredible internal work without having to like relive some horrible experience,
Yeah.
even though there are benefits to certain approaches as well. But I'd like to hear your thoughts. Go for it.
Steph.
Yeah, no, something I wanted to mention too, just the fact that you were able to help your friend in such a short amount of time. It was something so simple, right? Again, if there's a tool that's stacked in the right way that works with the mind, emotions, and body, it'll be efficient and it'll get the job done. And I also really love the fact that, it can happen so quickly that people can be freed almost instantaneously, and that it doesn't have to be hard work. I wanted to share actually another quick story. I worked with a woman. She's actually now in our training in the next cohort starting, and she gave me permission to share this story, so that's who I am. But she was supposed to come to a discovery call, and she ended up canceling it. And she just said, I'm solo momming at the moment, and I have a 3-month-old and I think a 2-year-old that wasn't sleeping. She's like, I'm literally so dysregulated, and everything that I thought that I had that could help me is not working. She's like, the things that I've seen miracles with, these tools. And she goes, so I just can't be on the call. So I wrote her back and I was like, do you want some help with the dysregulation? And she said, yes. So as part of our discovery call together to see if the training was right, we ran a process. It took 37 minutes total, but she was at a 10 out of 10. 10 is debilitating, can't function on our scale, right, of emotional charge. She's at a 10 out of 10 on rage with her kids. Imagine how she shows up, when she is that upset. And within 37 minutes, I looped her through a few different tools. And by the end, she was like laughing. She's like, oh my, I feel bad giggling. She's like, do you hear my kids in the other room? They're losing their shit right now. And my poor husband's dealing with them. She goes, and normally I would hop off a call like this and go save him. She goes, but I don't feel like I need to. He's capable. Instant shift. And what was so neat is that these tools are so simple. Like you said, 2 prompts, right? Does the job. All of the protocols we have, which is, I also feel is quite unique from other modalities out there, is it's literally in a script, easy to follow script. If you can read, you can create a transformation for yourself, because they can all be self-applied. You can use it on another person, and we've even facilitated groups with great success. But they're very simple and easy to use and fast and effective. And I feel like that's really what the world needs right now. Like, people are struggling. There is, even right now in Colorado, there are wildfires, and the level of stress on people who have to, evacuate. And I mean, that's traumatic for them. In addition to all the global crisis that's happening, plus an election that's happening right now, and everything, people need support to move through things in a much more rapid way and an integrative way. So it's not just, I'm just going to downregulate my nervous system right now to help it. It's like, I'm actually going to create a true internal shift where I can, think about the thing, look at the thing, talk about the thing, and it doesn't even bother me. Just like with my miscarriage. Fortunately, Wesley helped me file it where it belongs, in the past, so that I am empowered in the moment right now, and it's not impacting me here, which then it won't impact me into the future. So I just wanted to drop that little bit as well.
I think you're spot on. And it's like, when we are in such overwhelm, it's like something quick is usually what's needed, because we don't have like a huge attention span to go through like a whole story cycle. And, I collaborate with a ton of fantastic counselors and psychologists, and I refer people to them all the time. And then they refer people back to me, and we trade, and we both do this work, because it's different kinds of work. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, this isn't counseling. This is us processing an emotion, which is a molecule in your body, so that your nervous system can function correctly. And so it's like, that I think helps people realize, I'm like, oh, this is actually a little bit more of like a physiological process. It's like a facilitated way for your mind to cleanse waste. Because literally, like, there's a whole book about it called The Molecules of Emotion. It's like, when you are storing emotions in the body, it's literally like having gravel in a grandfather clock. Like, you have to move through those in order to allow your cells to actually function correctly. And that is why repressed emotions can turn into all sorts of conditions, which is tracked all over the world, and all kinds of research. We've known this for a very long time. So I want to make sure to honor your guys' time and allow, anyone who wants to ask questions, but we've covered a lot of really cool things here, and this will be recorded and available on my feed as well. So, and I'll tag them as collaborators. So please feel free to check it out. Share it with people that you think could benefit, because sometimes just talking about these concepts are beneficial by themselves. But if anyone wanted to learn more about this, whether they wanted to learn it as a modality for themselves or a modality to use as a practitioner for clients, or if they wanted to find a practitioner, what would you tell people?
Wesley's like, your turn. There's a question for you, Wesley, so you can answer that one next.
Yeah, let's do that. She says, are these tools related to addressing dysfunctional relationship dynamics?
Yes and no. Okay, so there's one thing we have to remember is that when we process something, our circumstances, our situation, our condition, what's happening in the world isn't changing. I like to joke that if I could do those things, I'd be a lot more expensive and much more difficult to get a hold of. So we have to just remember that we are processing our emotional reactions to something, and that as we do that, eventually that something is going to change because we are interacting with it in a completely shifted way. So as long as we understand that, like, this isn't a magic bullet that makes problems go away or makes medical diagnoses go away or make people go away, but we are processing our emotional reactions to what's happening. And one of the things I like to remember, I was really fond of Dr. Wayne Dyer for many years back in the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. And one thing that always stuck with me that he would say is, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And so when we make these shifts in ourselves, we begin to then eventually change the thing out there that we're working on. So yes, we can work on something like that, but what we're working on is, when you think about it, what negative emotion comes up. And then we're processing that emotion and then re-reflecting back on the situation, looking at it from a completely different state of awareness. And when we're there, we're seeing possibilities we didn't see before. We're able to take actions we didn't think were possible before. And so that sets the stage for the shift and the change. But we're always processing the individual and their subjective reaction to what it is that we're working on. So just as long as we also sort of understand those parameters, that I wish I was a magic worker and I could change conditions and situations and diagnoses in people, nobody can do that. But what we can do is process our relationship to it. And when we're there and we are not attached to our ego story anymore, we see pathways that weren't possible. Where there was a barrier, it's not there. We have the freedom and the courageousness to move beyond it, that we can do things that we couldn't do prior. And that's what's most important, because we're able to reinterpret the problem at a greater level of truth. We shed more light of truth onto something.
Yeah, and I'll chime in and be vulnerable about this. When I met my partner that I'm currently with, I had very anxious attachment style. My past history were men who cheated on me. And so the dynamics that I had in relationally, especially with men, were not the healthiest. And now the relationship I have is very healthy, but that's not familiar to me, right? It's very not what I'm used to. And so, of course, I may sabotage it. And I knew I did not want to do that. And so Wesley and I actually worked together and helped to integrate that the behavior or the anxiousness within me, that now I had new ways of being inside of my relationship with my amazing man, that enables me to be in a more secure place, in a place where I'm not doing real weird behaviors to try to like check and see if I can trust him, etc. And that really has bonded us deeper and created more intimacy, because I'm able to feel more safe opening my heart fully, instead of like having certain bricks up on, over my heart to make sure that I didn't get hurt again like I did last time. So now I'm able to make new choices inside the relationship, but he didn't change, I changed. I did the work. And I think that's what Wesley's pointing to, is it's so key that in any sort of relationship dynamic, first and foremost, you have to do whatever you need to do to get right, so that you're actually in wise mind versus emotion mind when you're engaging with anybody, whether it's friendship to romantic partnerships and more, and family dynamics. Yeah.
I'll say one more thing. It only takes 10 seconds though. There is a component to our training, however, where we do talk about communication dynamics, and they do improve relationships to an nth degree, because we learn how to communicate in a completely different way. And it's something called, we call a dyad. And there's a lot of beautiful relationship dyads. And that's something that a lot of us advanced practitioners, my wife and I do it. I know Stephanie and her beloved do this. And when things happen, there's a different way of discourse that you can enter into, where you sidestep conversation and talking back and forth and truly enter in a space where you can listen to and receive each other. And it takes 20 to 40 minutes probably, but when it's finished, all you really want to do is just embrace. So there are ways of doing it. It's not quite the protocol work we're talking about, but it's a beautiful way of working the communication style that the processes are built on.
Well, and I think learning how to communicate is literally the core of what our world needs more than anything right now. So, and I think exactly what you said is right too. It's like, as you raise your own consciousness and state of being and vibration that you're coming from, so you're coming from a place of like curiosity and unconditional love rather than like anger and resentment and revenge, you're going to bring that other person with you. Like, it's just science, it's entrainment. Like, you're going to start to raise their level of consciousness if you approach it with a certain level of consciousness. So yeah, again, if people wanted to learn how to do this, or they wanted to work with a practitioner, where would you send them for the right resources or connections?
Yeah, so you can go to our website, rapidrewiremethod.com. If you're like, gosh, this sounds really cool and I want to try it for myself, we actually have a free download on our homepage. Wesley guides you through one of our tools, and you can actually just have your own experience. If it's a bigger issue, you don't want to just use a recording, you do want to most likely work with a live person, you can always just send us a message at support@rapidrewiremethod.com. Joss and our team will respond back and we'll connect you with practitioner based on what you share, what you want to work on. We'll connect you to the right person. You may even get Wesley, depending on where you're at. But that's probably the best way, is just shoot us a message. We are really here to support people. If the training is not right, perfect. But we then recommend working with people. These tools work, they work well. But if you did want to learn them for yourself, you know, like you did, Christine, we have trainings like every few months that you can hop in and get these tools under your belt to add to whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, they've been great tools, so highly recommend it. And it's just, they're easy. And when you're going through the training, you are also going through the experience yourself, so you get your own work done in the process. And yeah, that's why I wanted to have you guys on, just to talk about this. And I love the place of thoughtfulness that you both speak from. So thank you so much for making time at the end of your day and while family is visiting in town to do this and to help people find solutions to what they're looking for. So appreciate you guys so much. And this was a fantastic talk. I can't wait to listen to it.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having us, Christine. We love you.
Okay.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
You too. We'll do it again soon.
All right. Bye.